Well, we are at 2:01, so I think we should get started. First off, thank you all for being here. I am so excited to be hosting this webinar with a fabulous panel of guests. And the first order of business is I would like to go over our quick agenda for our webinar, which is Shaping Transit's Future Through Equity and Agility. And our agenda for today is a round of introductions. Then we're going to dive right into the discussion, and we are going to have some time for Q&A. I'm gonna wait just a few more minutes because I think we have a few more folks rolling in. I have some folks looking at all the different widgets for me to keep me on track. But while we wait for a few more people to join, one thing that I would love for us to test out is the Q&A functionality. There should be a button at the bottom of your screen closer to the right where you can type in a question. If you wouldn't mind testing that for me and typing in where you're joining us from today, and then I'll be able to see that that function is working because we're going to collect all of your questions. Even if we don't get to them at our Q&A session for today, we'll make sure to follow up. Ooh, where do we have? Oh, San Francisco. Great, great. I got some friends there. San Antonio, I would hope so. Charleston, South Carolina or West Virginia? I'm sure there are more Charlestons that I don't know about. South Carolina, welcome, welcome. Seattle, thank you for joining. New Orleans, oh, one of my favorite cities. I have too many favorite cities. Santa Cruz. Did you know that when I was younger, I wanted to go to UC Santa Cruz just so I could be a banana slug? That's their mascot. I thought that was great. Anyway, well, thank you all. Honolulu, thank you for joining us today. I think we are ready to get started. Thank you for making sure that all of our tech is working right. I'm going to start with a round of introductions. And I guess first and foremost, my name is Anita Davidson, and I'm an account manager here with Swiftly. I joined almost 2 years ago, and before that, I was a transit planner at SEPTA. You know, my background is all in spatial analytics and transportation planning, and that's really how I ended up at Swiftly, which is the first big data platform for transit agencies. And we work with over 100 customers worldwide, and which is really why I'm excited here to be having this conversation with you all today. And before we really jump into introductions of our panels, I want to give a big thank you to all of you for joining us today, for our attendees, but in particular for our panelists for helping me have this conversation. I'm really thrilled and can't wait to dig into some of these topics with you today. So to kick us off, I'm hoping that you all can introduce ourselves for all of our guests and maybe popcorn it, or I can just, you know, call people out. Let's popcorn it. Dr. Ryerson, Megan, would you mind introducing yourself to everyone, please?
Oh, sure. I'd be delighted. Thanks so much, Anita. Hi, I'm Megan Ryerson. I'm the UPS Chair of Transportation and an Associate Professor of City and Regional Planning and Electrical and Systems Engineering at the University of Pennsylvania. At the University of Pennsylvania, I engage in research in a variety of areas, but certainly in transit equity and in thinking about how we can make new methods, make new data, merge qualitative and quantitative data to really plan equitable transportation systems and transit systems. I'm just delighted to be here. Thank you so much. I'm going to popcorn it to my wonderful research partner of SEPTA and popcorn it to Brandon Miller.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Ryerson. Good afternoon. I'm Brandon Miller. I'm a senior operations planner with SEPTA here in Philadelphia, and I'm primarily responsible for improving the customer experience as well as operational efficiency. This is done by developing route and scheduling changes for SEPTA's bus network. I had the awesome honor of working with Anita years ago as we developed and implemented SEPTA's first new bus route in over 10 years. We can get into it later, but Dr. Ryerson helped us with that and conducted some awesome research on that new bus route 49. So I'll popcorn it to Steve in San Antonio.
Hey, thanks so much, Brandon. Great to be here. I'm Steve Young, Vice President of Technology and Innovation at Via Metropolitan Transit down in San Antonio. We're the big Via, so it's an all uppercase. We serve the greater San Antonio region. My team, we have all kinds of technology, from all the normal corporate technologies. We have a transportation technology group. I noticed Tony Felker in the audience. He runs that, a really good group. And a lot of really working on kind of on the tech end is a lot of, I think, increasingly a lot of customer focused things that we've really been trying to implement to kind of play catch up with technology and make sure we're meeting where our customers, where they want to, in a way they want to experience transit now, because the expectations are different. So we've been really focusing on new ways of fare payment, new ways of trip planning, new ways of getting better data into the hands of our customers, and a lot of things like that. So real excited to be here and joining this great crew. And I'm certainly need to pass it on to the one and only Jerome.
Thank you so much, Steve. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jerome Horn, and I'm a transportation specialist at Foursquare Integrated Transportation Planning, which is a private transportation planning firm based in DC. Prior to that, I worked at Indigo, which is the transit agency for Indianapolis, for 5 years, where I had a heavy focus on sort of customer experience, rider experience on our system, really concentrating on wayfinding, passenger information, getting real-time data, and just thinking of better ways to get information to our riders. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm joining you from the International Micro Museum of Transit today.
Thank you so much, everyone, for those great introductions. Before we jump into the discussion, I really wanted to help set the stage. For all the folks attending, you sent in some really, really phenomenal questions that have helped us, break this dense conversation into 3 big parts. And the first part that we're going to really be touching on as we think about equity in transit is bridging the digital divide. And from there, we're going to talk about leveraging resources and what agencies and our industry partners can do to help make sure that we are utilizing all of the right resources to have transit come back in a great and exciting way as things start to open up. And finally, I think the past year and a half has really taught us that flexibility is really important. And as we look to the future of transit, what does that mean to agencies, and what does that mean to customers, and what does that mean to our partners? So these are going to be the main topics guiding our conversation today. And if you know me, I love data and I love transit, and I think that this is a really exciting conversation to be having right now. And if anything comes up throughout our conversation, any questions or feedback, please drop them in that little chat box, and we'll do our best to address them at the end of our session. Okay, so our first topic of today is bridging the digital divide. And in the public sector, we talk a lot about the digital divide and the gulf of people who have access to the internet and thereby information, and those who don't. And what I'd like to do to start off this part of our conversation is to ask you, our panelists, how you feel about the digital divide, and was it exacerbated by the pandemic, and what strategies can we employ as an industry to reach all communities? And I wanted to start our conversation with Steve, because I think the work that you're doing at Via San Antonio is really related to this. And just to kick things off, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about what you're doing with SMS and engaging folks for public comment through telephone town halls, I think it would be a great way to start. Thank
you, Anita. Yeah, I mean, digital divide's real, right? I mean, it exists in every city, every transit agency, right? We have, a large number of customers with, either lesser or no internet access. And that's really hard because a lot of us are really focusing on all these new technologies to get information and fare payment and things into the hand of our customers. Yet, we're kind of leaving a group behind. And so that's one thing at VIA we're always trying to look at is how do we make sure we're not missing out on some customers when we're rolling out things, or how do we also serve those communities that also have the same needs. And so one project, like you mentioned, Anita, was our SMS texting service. We've had this for years, right? We've had a 5-digit code at a bus stop number at every stop, and a number that folks can send a text to and get next bus arrivals at that stop. It's not new, and we send millions of these out a year, right? But this doesn't mean we can't improve it, right? We're improving all of our digital services for our clients, but the nice thing about this is that it just needs a cell phone, right? So even that old flip phone, that brick of a phone, can still access this service. And we do know most of our customers do have cell phones. So that part we know. So we have surveys that have told us this. So we're fairly confident and we see it in the numbers that this is really, really highly used. So we did work really closely with Swiftly, in fact, in this project, not only moving our texting service to Swiftly so that it's next to instantaneous, which is really fantastic, right? So you used to text and kind of wait about 30 seconds to get a result. Not a huge deal. It's just not kind of the reality of how we live today. So now it's next to instantaneous. And then the discussions kind of came, we were in discussions with Swiftly. This really wasn't something that I think Swiftly had planned or we had planned. We just talked about how we could improve this. And I think the whole idea came up about, hey, can we get detour information relevant to that bus stop into those text messages? Because a lot of times customers go to a stop, and if they're not using a digital app like Google Maps or Transit, which typically have the detour information, they may be missing out on that detour information. So that was a really exciting project, and we worked with Swiftly. Now when customers text to get next bus information, they'll also get relevant detour information right in that text stream. So just a way to kind of retrofit something we've been doing, make it better, make it more relevant to our passengers. It's really hot here. It just got really scorching hot this week. We don't want passengers standing at a bus stop if there's not a bus coming, right? So that's really just one little example of something we've done. The other thing you mentioned was our teletown halls, and this is a really cool thing that our public engagement group really I think it kind of rose out of the need of the pandemic, but I think the realization is that, whoa, wait a second, this is really addressing a need all the time at VIA. And the idea being, we have public meetings, we have board meetings, we have webinars and the like. Once again, with the digital divide, some folks may not get to participate. So the whole idea of the telephone town hall is to take the most common medium out there, the telephone, let people register their phone number to attend, and it calls them when the meeting starts. They pick up and attend the hall right through their phone. So really fantastic idea. And I don't have the exact numbers with me, but like our attendance through meetings was far higher than any other format we'd ever held. So really kind of exciting, simple technology. But once again, it's leveraging tech in a way to address people that may not have access otherwise.
Thanks, Steve. That was great. And I have to say, I have so many meetings, and I wish that someone would just call me when I need to be at a meeting. That's great. That's great. It's and I think, watching the work that we've done as partners has been really inspiring for this conversation. And I would love to ask Brandon and Megan and Jerome, what have your experiences been from your different realms of the transit industry for recognizing this divide and making sure that not only is transit equitable, but the information around transit is equitable and accessible to all people.
So I'll jump in, Anita. So as you know very well, customer engagement is something really big and important to SEPTA through our robust customer connection platform. But we haven't really had a solid or a formal platform where we were engaging customers informally to obtain feedback on our services. So in October 2019, excuse me, everyone, the service planning department, we actually piloted a new pop-up outreach initiative. And so instead of directing customers to an online web form to provide feedback on our services, we went to meet our customers where they were. And so staff visited an important transfer hub, and we conducted tablet-based surveys as customers waited for their buses or trolleys or as they departed vehicles. And our objective was simply to better understand the customer's experience, particularly transferring at this location. We had a really neat origin and destination map exercise, and that really allowed us to capture customer travel patterns who regularly use this location And it went really well because we were able to use those survey results to adjust schedules and transfer times for the following sign up period. But then COVID hit, so we tabled all of that in-person engagement. But that was just one example. We, instead of, like I said, pushing people online, but going forward, I'm really looking forward to resuming in-person engagement, in the context of Bus Revolution, our bus network redesign. And we had some initial engagement recently. We're in phase 1. We held virtual town halls and online surveys, but I'm really excited about the Project Bus for our initiative that will be able to visit communities and help residents understand the need for this project or the redesign, help them understand the trade-offs and any possible outcomes. And I'd love for Dr. Ryerson, maybe you talked about getting the information to people to give some context about our awesome wayfinding master plan.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brandon. I'll say two things. Brandon had mentioned that we had collaborated on a study looking at SEPTA's newest bus route in 20 years, the bus route number 49, which Anita had a very big hand in as well. And my doctoral student and a big team in collaboration with SEPTA performed onboard surveys to ask riders of the 49, this brand new bus route, a number of questions, but one of the questions was, how did you learn about this route? And a surprising number of people just saw the bus on the street and then asked someone about it, or looked it up when they got home, or whatever it is, and or stopped the bus driver at the stop and asked the bus driver about it. And that was very surprising to me, just this sort of observation, rather than this information being pushed out to the communities who might benefit from this bus the most. And I just thought that was a moment where we think about the digital divide and so on. But I think that at the core of it, how are we communicating new changes to maybe communities that aren't constantly, following SEPTA on Twitter and, doing all of these, other sort of things on social media where information can be pushed out, right? How do we make sure that we're reaching those, we're reaching these communities? And Brandon had mentioned also that we're working on wayfinding and improving wayfinding in the SEPTA stations. One of the things that we find is that intermodal terminals, and this goes for airports. This goes, right. It's not just SEPTA's big stations. This is really, all intermodal terminals. They are often planned by people who are in the know, and they know these stations so well, and they know other stations so well, and they know airports, and they're frequent travelers and so on. And because of that, there won't necessarily be the level of information and the level of guidance that is needed for someone who is new to a station. And so we've been sort of following people around as they transfer, and they're wearing eye tracking glasses. We can see where they're looking, and there are places where there just aren't enough signs. There's confusion about which hallway to take. There's confusion about leaving the station and having to re-enter the station and so on. So just this idea that not only do we need to tell people that a bus exists that will take them from their origin to their destination, but how do they navigate to that bus? How in a transfer station do they go from one train to another, or even in a more challenging, go from one train to a bus, right? And how do we provide that signage? How do we provide that guidance and that information in a way that really promotes universal design, not just people who are able-bodied, but people who might be mobility limited, visually impaired, or so on. It's a very big task. And I'll just end by saying it is incredibly eye-opening to shadow travelers who are brand new to a station or travelers who are mobility limited. I mean, in all my years, it's been one of the most informative things that I have done about what we need for station design.
Megan, thank you for sharing that. And I'm excited to hear a little bit more about, you know, the partnership between SEPTA and the University of Pennsylvania when we talk about leveraging resources. But before we move on from this topic, Jerome, I wanted to get your input because I really think of you as the voice between industry thought leadership and the users of transit. And you had this, like, you were doing this for a transit agency, and now you are working with many transit agencies. And so as we wrap up this section, what do you think is important to stay focused on, and what you know, of all of these things that we've been talking about that have come through the pandemic, what do you want to see to help continue transit forward?
Yeah, I think building upon all the great things that Steve, Megan, and Brandon have already said, you know, I think in terms of the digital divide, it is going to be very important, or it is important for transit agencies, transportation providers to maintain a hybrid approach moving forward. So that means both high tech and high touch. So high tech being our virtual, using all the data and the tools available to us, but high touch in person, and still understanding that it's important to meet people where they are. And we've been able to do that through some of these tools that we have through the pandemic. But I think it's going to be critical that there's a hybrid approach that's maintained so that people have that one-on-one in-person interaction, because that's still very important. And there are just certain social cues and conversations that you can't get from virtual or online engagement. And then the second piece also builds upon is that rider experience, and understanding what you know, what that is like. I'm so glad to hear about the work that's going on with SEPTA and wayfinding and following people around. And I think many transit agencies, large and small and in between, could really use a focus on what it's like to actually traverse the system. You know, from a wayfinding standpoint, are the announcements clear? Do I know, you know, do our bus stop signs make sense? Do they actually have information that's useful? So I think that's also really focusing on that customer experience, because many other industries have been doing that and are doing that. And I think in transit, you know, we just assume, oh, there's a bus or train coming every 10 minutes, it's good enough. But that's not all it. We need to make sure that we're looking at the human element and the human side of things beyond just running good service.
Thank you, Jerome. And I have to say, I can't wait for that planning bus to come to my neighborhood, Brandon. And I miss those one-on-one interactions. And, you know, Jerome, you're right. It's now more than ever staying focused on that customer experience. I think is going to be critical, and looking at from all aspects. I saw a chat in a little comment in our chat, and, you know, it's like, what is it like to be someone who is elderly and traveling via transit? And, you know, or what if you like me, you are a Luddite? What things can we do better to make transit more accessible and usable? So I want to keep us moving. And the next thing that I want to talk about is leveraging resources. And it is, I feel like I'm a broken record, but over the past year and a half, agencies have been asked to do so much. I mean, on, you know, beyond the additional cleaning, there have been multiple schedule changes, trying to keep up with the very fast changing needs of customers, whether it be from when do people travel to where do they travel, how do they like to travel. These are all big things, and transit has always been an industry that has needed to be smart with its resources. So I want to get a sense of how our agencies and our industry partners leveraging what they have at hand to bring ridership back, and to bring ridership back in an equitable way, and to meet the changing needs of transit and its customers. And I think that all of you can speak to this. So please, anyone jump in.
Hey, I'll jump in real quick with one thing, because this is that whole do more with less, which agencies always, right? We're always hit with that, but even more so during COVID. And one of the things that my team really tackled was the frequency of our next bus information. We were kind of lagging in that area, maybe 30, 40 seconds a vehicle. And, in the modern day and age, that feels a little slow. And so they actually were able to find a way to leverage a router that we've had on our buses for a number of years to report that information. So essentially, it was almost a free of charge project other than resources and an antenna, staff resources and antenna. Now our buses are reporting at a really high frequency, like every 5 or 6 seconds. And that's really helping us in a lot of ways. And we've seen some really fantastic, numbers around our predictions and accuracy with no small bit of help from you guys, because we're sending that data directly to you guys for real time as swiftly. So that's been a really kind of neat thing. It impacts all our customers. It impacts that SMS next bus, which I mentioned in the prior question. So I'll just stop with that.
Thanks, Steve. And faster data, better data, and it trickled, I think your position is really interesting because you're responsible for all of the data infrastructure in a transit agency that impacts so many downstream systems. And just thinking about it from that level, I think is really fascinating, which is why I was very excited that you could join this call. Because we talk a lot about physical infrastructure like bridges and buses, but data infrastructure is becoming even more important. And to think it, being able to think about what do we have at hand and how can we utilize it is really, really important.
Yeah, I'll jump in, Anita. And to that point, SEPTA had the unfortunate experience of having a malware attack back in August of 20. And so our data infrastructure was compromised. Fortunately, not on the operational side, fortunately, but our data collection, our APC system was like at a standstill. It couldn't have been worse timing, excuse me, everyone. But, I was just totally impressed with my colleagues at SEPTA, just the resiliency that's been demonstrated and, of course, our operators, but really just like getting our systems restored and everybody really doing more with less. We were not collecting ridership data at such a critical time when we're trying to meet people's needs during the pandemic. And so coming out of that, we have been bringing our systems back online. We've recently launched an estimated seat availability tool. Of course, social distancing is a primary concern for a lot of individuals riding public transit. And so I'm really excited about this tool and how it will improve the customer experience, because we're providing key insights to help customers plan their travel on SEPTA by looking at this estimated seat availability tool. Also, with respect to data, we're expanding our Tableau user base. And so this is really interesting, or exciting rather, I should say, because we're synthesizing, but it is an interesting process, Anita and team, it really is, because we're synthesizing very robust data sets, including operator availability, missed trips that might result from available operators or lack of, and understanding those customer impacts. And ultimately, our goal here is to really, again, synthesize this information and allow us to build the most reliable schedules for our customers. So that's been probably the biggest experience for us in the last year.
Well, I remember that, Brandon, and it was, I know it was a hard time for SEPTA, but I wanted to call out your point about getting passengers this information to make actionable decisions. And it's, Jerome, I know we talked about this before, agencies have so much data, drip, data rich, information poor. And how do we get both agencies the data that they need to make good decisions, but going back to the passenger who we operate transit for, how do we get them the information that they need to choose transit first and to make that an actionable decision and to say yes to transit. And I know that Megan and Jerome, you come at this from a few different angles, so I'm excited to what you have to say about this.
Yeah, so I'll jump in here. Absolutely, I think it all, as you mentioned, the customer, it centers back on the customer and the riders, kind of the humans at the center of everything we do. But stepping back from that, from an agency standpoint, working with agencies all across the country now, as I'm sure Swiftly has seen, different agencies, large, small, and in between, have different resources, but it is really critical that agencies begin to, they're not already, leveraging the data or dedicating, specific agency staff to helping to interpret and manipulate that data. That's a really critical step, because the more organized agencies can become with their data, then the better they can be at distributing that information. At Indigo, we were fortunate, we were a customer of Swiftly and used a lot of the great dashboards and tools that were developed to help us better help our staff be more productive and get access to information faster and be able to interpret data faster. We're doing the same thing at Foursquare ITP. We're working on some ITS data standards to standardize things like APC and AVL data. And we just released a GTFS validation tool recently. But all these things are the building blocks that take all of that information, whether it's GTFS data, getting accurate real-time predictions, those allow us to put that information out to the customer and have more robust data and better information for our riders to make the decisions that they need.
And I'd love to chime in, Nina. I love that data-rich information pour. I jotted it down. I love that. It's so crisp and clear. And when I think about data and what data is needed for agencies to engage in more equity-focused planning, I really try to get away from the quantitative, because as you said, transit agencies, we have a lot of quantitative data. We have so much data, and there's been so much innovation around these data. I find that the more data we have and the easier it is to collect, the more that we only use these data for decision making, whether we should be using these data or not. And so ridership, to me, is a key variable that comes to mind that we can collect. We can collect the number of riders that we have over different timescales. And at least from my understanding, working with transit agencies, ridership is a very important variable for deciding who gets new frequency, who gets cut frequency, who gets new routes, and so on. But ridership in itself is a function of supply, right? And so if we're thinking about equity-focused planning, I think about a neighborhood maybe that in particular needs to be connected to certain job centers, specific job centers. And if the supply of transit to those job centers isn't there, then the ridership isn't going to be there. That doesn't mean that it's not valuable to connect that community with more transit, right? It means that they're currently misconnected to the destinations that they need to and want to travel to. And so when we rely on ridership, we really bias our transit planning decisions. And so when I think about how we should utilize data to make actionable decisions, I don't know, don't tell my statistics students I'm going to say this, but maybe we should just abandon our empirical data, or at least not hold it to the importance, use it as one piece, right? But really engage in more qualitative analysis and in a less empirical and more just conceptual understanding of neighborhoods and their needs and how they need to be connected. May I answer a live question? Someone asked me, how do I solicit participants for the wayfinding study, and could agencies without eye tracking glasses conduct lower tech versions of this study? I'd say absolutely. Actually, for a large airport, right before COVID hit, I engaged in a wayfinding study, and all of our participants were either elderly or people who were living with disabilities. And we only shadowed them. We didn't put the eye tracking glasses on them. We just felt like, they already had some mobility issues, and we didn't want to, add to it with that level. We took copious notes. We had two people shadowing them, one kind of helping and the other just taking copious notes of every single move, everything they looked at, every concern that they had. And then we had a long questionnaire. And I just got asked if we compensate them. And I would say that depends on the sponsor of the project.
Thank you, Megan. I don't even know where to find those questions in real time, so I'm glad that you found them. And I've been thinking about this for a long time, ever since I was a transit planner. And Brandon, you taught me this as you were my mentor into transit planning, is we have ridership numbers, but we can't take away the human aspects from that number. And if you only have 10 people at a stop, well, who are those people? And I think, understanding our communities that we serve is really, really important, and being able to put the right data behind those analyses and have them used in the appropriate ways is going to be really big. And I am getting a time check here. Steve, Jerome, Brandon, I wonder if there's anything else you wanted to add before we move into our next session of embracing flexibility.
Yeah, just one more quick add. In terms of leveraging resources, we talked very, very briefly, but I just want to touch on the partnerships aspect, that agencies working together, whether it's the transit agency and the city Department of Transportation or the state Department of Transportation or MPOs. I think it's really important that all of those groups also are sharing information and sharing data, because we need a more complete picture of the built environment, and not just the built environment, but also, as Megan was talking about, the people. Getting more deeper into developing kind of personas and understanding who people are that are actually traveling, what their changing and evolving needs are, is really important. But I think that especially transit agencies partnering with city departments of transportation, state departments of transportation, and where possible, trying to extract information from TNCs and scooter providers. I mean, those things really matter too, to be able to get a more accurate and complete picture of the data space.
Really quickly, Anita, I just wanted to chime in on what Dr. Ryerson was mentioning about that qualitative aspect into like project evaluation and service provisions. And so, we're doing an awesome job. I think we've made significant improvements during my tenure at SEPTA, striking that balance, between, allocation of resources, but also, ensuring that we are providing coverage, right? Even though it might not be the most frequent, because it's not the most utilized service. And so I think that SEPTA has really done an awesome job. Even from growing up in the city, I've seen significant changes, or improvements rather. And so it is challenging, but Megan's spot on. And so I'm really excited about the future at SEPTA, the leadership at SEPTA, and understanding exactly what Megan was speaking to about, those qualitative aspects, and really focusing on the customer. And, our leadership has really demonstrated that. So I'm excited.
Brandon, Jerome, thank you for those 2 points to wrap us up. And there's so much that I wanted to dig into in this section. The partnerships between SEPTA and the University in Pennsylvania. Jerome, the partnerships that you have across your entire community of transit folks and transit related folks. And, Steve, you don't know this yet, but I am sure that you are going to form a partnership with Brandon Miller, because we were just talking about earlier today about how excited he was to hear about all the things that Via San Antonio is doing, and, building this community to support transit. I think is a really exciting thing, and a huge resource that I'm so grateful to be a part of. And I'm keeping my eye on the clock, because I want to make sure we have time for questions. So I'm going to jump right into embracing flexibility. And I mean, the last year and a half, how many changes have we experienced on a day-to-day basis? And I think about the travel patterns that I used to rely on when planning transit. And I think that you all are doing amazing things to make sure that flexibility is something that can support a full return of transit. And Brandon, we were just talking about, that balance of leveraging resources. And one of the exciting things that I heard about was the OWL link. And I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, but we come from all different parts of the transit industry, and I would really love to hear how you folks are thinking about flexibility and how it can help, and is it here to stay?
Definitely. So, well, it is a pilot, and so we hope that it's here to stay. It just launched. It's been under a month, but I just wanted to kind of just piggyback on what I was just mentioning about, leadership at SEPTA. Leslie Richards, she came at a really critical time, taking the helm of the organization, and then COVID jumped in. So it's really been an interesting year and a half, right? And Anita, you know very well, SEPTA as a true legacy system, we have a rich history that the region is proud of, right? And so a lot of our services and things have been in place for decades. And so I just really wanted to mention, under Ms. Richards' leadership, we just released our new customer-focused strategic plan, which is entitled, SEPTA Forward. And SEPTA Forward is just a real testament of our understanding of, the need that we must embrace flexibility and how we must adapt our organization and the way that we do business and provide service to meet the changing needs of our riders, right? And so really quickly, there's 3 goals that are part of our strategic plan, SEPTA Forward, and it's developing a proactive organization, providing an intuitive experience, and delivering a seamless transit network. So at its core, to achieve those goals, we must embrace flexibility, right? And so with respects to our link, our link is already getting ahead with that last goal of delivering a seamless transit network. So our link is an on-demand microtransit service where we're using our paratransit vehicles, and it's actually serving as a last mile connector between 3 of our 24-hour city transit routes, and it's connecting customers with late night employment destinations in the suburbs, particularly Lower Bucks County. So this is a really exciting initiative, totally a demonstration of our willingness to embrace flexibility. And so just wanted to tie that all into our strategic plan. At its core, it really is embracing flexibility to see the region recover and move forward.
Amazing. That's really okay. I have nothing meaningful to say, so I'm hoping that Megan and Jerome and Steve, you can help carry this section.
Yeah, I'll toss in a couple of things. Much like Brandon, we have a on-demand service called Via Link. We're past our pilot stage, I'm happy to say, and it turned out really, I'm glad to see you guys are doing it because we've had a great experience and really positive results. We removed, long, big old buses from, relatively low density suburban areas, one suburban area, and, they were also pretty low frequency, and we replaced it with an on-demand service, and, have had really good results such that we're rebidding this essentially to distribute the service to many regions of the greater San Antonio area to better service our customers. So really excited about that. With that comes lots of challenges around data, app integration, some technical things, but it's great for our customers. The whole flexibility thing is really important. We're also rolling out a new payment system as we speak. And we're going to have our own app, but we're also going to sell fares and transit app, right? And so it's just meeting people where they are. And with that, we also know a lot of our customers can't use credit cards or choose not to use credit cards, as it may be, yet they have a smartphone. So one of the big things we've been pushing for, and we're going to be rolling this out, is cash payment for our mobile app and for other things potentially. So that'll allow customers to go, and a lot of our customers are cash based, right? And that's common in a lot of agencies. I think maybe more so down south, but they'll be able to go to literally like hundreds of locations around San Antonio, show a barcode, the funds will immediately transfer onto their phone into their app. So really kind of cool technology. But once again, it's we're trying to kind of embrace some folks that maybe if we just rolled out a new mobile app, they may not have benefited from it. So it's really kind of being flexible in a lot of things we do.
Jerome,
Yeah.
what are you hearing is like one of the most important things related to flexibility for bringing transit back, from the customer perspective, as so much has changed in the last year and change?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think from agency and customer perspective, the ability to be able to pivot and one, communicate out to customers immediately with changes, as we saw with COVID, lots of transit agencies had to make quick changes, maybe to their entire network or parts of their network, shut down routes or different modes. And so this flexibility is also, really allowing, agencies to implement operational changes on the fly and very quickly. Something that we've not traditionally been very good about. Typically a service change for transit agency, builds up over months, and a lot of agencies make modifications to their systems, maybe 3 times a year or so. But I think having more robust tools to be able to make those changes much faster and adapt to whatever may come in the future, right? I don't think anyone was prepared for this pandemic, and there really was no way to be. But I think now we have a more robust plan for how do we react to crisis situations, and how can we embrace changes on a much quicker pace and on a much larger scale. The other thing I'd say really quickly, sort of related to this, but there are a lot of small urban, rural, and tribal transit systems that are out there. And I just want to make sure we don't leave them out. But someone asked a question about resources and more information for smaller systems. And so I just want to recommend that the National Center for Applied Transit Technology, or NCAT, is a great resource out there that has a lot of information that's more practical and applied to those smaller transit systems that are out there, because sometimes in these conversations, we often get caught up in the big systems or the medium systems. And I just want to make sure that we're paying some love to our small, urban, rural, and tribal transit systems out there. So once again, NCAT, the National Center for Applied Transit Technology, is a great place to go.
Nice. All right. And before I start, I'd love to give a shout out for my former students on here: Anita, Shausha, Ben, and Simon. Hi, everyone. And in discussing flexibility, I'm going to sort of circle back to what I said at the last point. And when I think about flexibility, I think about reconceptualizing what the goal of transit is and who transit is for. And one of the things I've been sort of moved by this year was hearing Dr. Destiny Thomas talk about transit planning for equity. And she talked about, moving away from planning the commute and thinking about neighborhood distribution, and prioritizing neighborhood distribution instead of, this more at this point antiquated idea that, people needed in the morning to come in and needed in the evening to go out. And I think that when I think about flexibility, moving past that mindset, that requires some real mental gymnastics if you've come up in this field. And I think that that's a key piece moving forward that the transit planning community really needs to embrace in order to authentically do equity focused transportation planning.
Megan, I'm so happy that you said that, because just the other day, I'm in Philadelphia, and I've been working from my back bedroom for a year and a half now. And the thing that I miss most is my commute. But really, the thing that I miss most is taking transit. And so even myself as a customer, I have to reframe the way I think about transit. And it's been an interesting personal exercise to think, okay, I live in my back bedroom, but I miss the bus. So where am I going to go? And I'm like, well, shoot, I'm going to take the bus to Chinatown next week to go get lunch while all my West Coast peers are having breakfast. And I'm so glad that you said that. And it brings me back to the last webinar I had the privilege of hosting, and Tamika Butler was on our panel, and she closed us out by saying, we are all transit dependent, because we are dependent on the people that depend on transit. And I think holding that thought near and dear as we come together as an industry to reimagine what transit can be and should be for all of our communities. And Jerome, you're right, not just our big cities, but everywhere around the country. And so I think that we're out of time for this section, but I am loving all of the things that are being said, and I'm gonna move us not so gracefully into Q&A. And I'm sorry, I don't know how to turn off notifications on my computer, but this is a section where we have two questions, and I know we're short on time, that I want to get to. And if you have any remaining questions, please drop them in the chat, because one, we will be able to follow up with you one-on-one, and two, those questions will help guide us in the next iteration of this webinar as we continue talking about these topics, as we continue reaching out to our communities and coming together and having these hard but very important conversations. So the first one from our attendee list is, given the increase in federal funding, how do we support an equitable distribution of resources?
I'll start really quickly, and maybe someone can finish off. I think that kind of what we've been talking about, if we're really serious about equity in planning, then we need to, it is about reframing even from the way that those federal funds are typically distributed. Like that's a policy piece and another part of the conversation we don't have a lot of time to get into, but largely a lot of those allocations of money are sort of kind of set, and those are serious conversations that we need to have about who is that money for, where is it going, and really break a lot of those traditional kind of frames of mind about how we have allocated transportation money. I think the quickest thing that we can do is really change that 80-20, where it's like almost 80% of the funding is going to highways and the other 20 is going to other modes, and it's very clear that we need to get more funding to other modes, and then that funding needs to be prescribed to actually be distributed to places and people that could really stand to benefit.
Thank you, Jerome. That 80-20, I've been, I don't know if you've had this experience, but you travel to other parts of the world and you see how transit is operated, and I can't help but think, what if we funded transit differently? And I think you're right on the money, as they say. But moving on to our last question, can you elaborate on collaborations between agencies to create shareable data sets? For example, GTFS feeds with common stop IDs and locations. This and data cleaning is a major hurdle in multiple provider regions.
So this doesn't exactly speak to the challenge that I guess this was that James shared, but the gentleman shared, because we're the only provider in the region per se. But we have a really strong partnership with DVRPC, our regional MPO, and so a lot of data mining or data cleaning rather, particularly with respect to GTFS, does take place with DVRPC, but his question is very specific, and we have an awesome relationship with them in terms of, like I said, data cleaning and stuff, but maybe not the best response for that, but
I'm just thinking,
work really well with DVRPC. So,
and we in Philadelphia, we have a few New Jersey transit lines that come through, but not as many. And I'm thinking, the Bay Area in San Francisco, where you have so many different providers.
And I guess the key difference is that, it was the common stop IDs, right? And so keep in mind, right, we don't actually serve the same physical stops in most cases, right? And so that's probably the big thing there. It's an interesting question.
Yeah, I'll chime in really quick on this, because this does not affect us where we are either. But knowing what I know about legacy software providers in the transit industry, my guess is there's almost no systems out there today that could let two different agencies match data sets like that together. And which means it's probably going to all have to be custom work or manual work. Now, I don't know if there's like some easier solutions, just, hey, let's give all our data to Transit app, right? We both send separately our GTFS files and let Transit app figure it out, right? They should be able to, and I'm not just highlighting them, maybe Google Maps or Apple Maps or whoever. I would think those apps can already they already can handle multiple feeds. So the question is, how well would they route, between the different lines and things? I don't know, but trying to, get our legacy software providers to embrace something like this, my guess would be a great challenge.
What I hear is that the industry partners in the tech field can do a better job in supporting areas where there are shared amenities and shared transit stops to make a more seamless experience. And actually, you know what, James, before we close out, a great example of this is actually Ride KC in Kansas City. It's an organization that is supported by 5 different operators, and they have a unified GTFS feed. And if you're interested in learning more about how they do that, I'm more than happy to connect you, because they're one of our customers and they are phenomenal. I am getting told that we are having to wrap up. And before we say goodbye, I want to give a huge thank you to Megan, to Brandon, to Jerome, to Steve for being part of this conversation. It's been a dream of mine to talk to some of the folks in the industry that I think are helping to move us forward. And thank you for sharing your expertise and your candidness and helping us have this conversation. It's been a really huge pleasure and honor. And I want to say thank you to all of our attendees for all of your questions, for all of your thoughtful engagement. I can't wait to see you at the next one. If anything is pressing before then, please don't hesitate to reach out. Here's my contact info. I'm sure I'm in a phone book. I'm just, thank you again, and we can't wait to chat with you soon.